Welcome to the Jeff Knows Inc. Show with your host, Jeff Lopes, where we bring you the world's top athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, influencers, and their journeys to success.
We are live on the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. Super excited to have on a gentleman we've been back and forth for a while to make this happen. Dave Hurt, what's up, brother?
What is up, my friend?
You got a nice little studio set up too, which I appreciate because some of our guests, it's just an iPhone going. So I appreciate that. Where are you based out of right now?
So I am in Lake Wylie, South Carolina, just south of Charlotte, North Carolina, down here in the States. So
you've always been out of that area?
I have, for the most part. So I grew up in Eastern North Carolina, went out to California for a couple of years for grad school at UC Berkeley, the bastion of liberal education. That was a fun couple of years. And then came back here to the greater Charlotte area where my wife is from. So yeah, we've been in the Carolinas basically the whole time except for 2 years.
Yeah, it's a beautiful area. Beautiful area. We're up in 3 years ago. I was just talking to a friend up in Myrtle Beach, which is just a little past that. Beautiful. Yeah. We drove right by. So gorgeous areas, right? A lot of wilderness, a lot of outdoor stuff happening there.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. I actually used to own a business in Myrtle Beach. So I owned a chain of restaurants, and we had a Myrtle Beach location, and I would go out there as much as I could because it was basically an excuse to escape to the beach for a little bit. But yeah, it's nice down here, man. We have the mountains in the west, the beach in the east, and pretty decent temperatures. It gets close to 100 in the summer, 100 Fahrenheit. I know you're Canadian. I don't know if you use that weird Celsius stuff, but it gets pretty dang hot and humid. But otherwise, man, it's nice here. And South Carolina is a red state, so that's always a plus if you're a business owner.
So give me a rundown. I mean, you said a chain of a franchise of restaurants. What was the franchise name?
It was a craft beer bar concept called the Brass Tap. It actually still in existence. We started in 2014, built our first one at the beginning of 2015, and then opened several consecutively after that. Sold it at the end of 2018. So I really dodged a bullet selling it before the whole COVID thing happened, man. And it was one of those things where I bit off more than I could chew in terms of, so I invest a lot in real estate as well. So I was doing that pretty hot and heavy at that time, doing a lot of new construction subdivision projects. And I was still working my corporate gig in technical recruiting and building restaurants at the same time. So my wife got pregnant and she said, look, buddy, something's, it's just too much. It's too much. And she was right. And so serendipitously, private equity group came along and offered to buy the bar business at that time anyway. So we were just like, yep.
So concept, did you have partners? Was this the soul? How many partners were involved?
I had a couple business partners, and we didn't start the franchise. We didn't come up with the concept. We were just franchisees.
Okay.
So it started down in Florida.
Yeah.
When I joined on, there was a handful of Florida locations, and we got the rights to North and South Carolina. So we were opening locations throughout the Carolinas.
I always find it interesting with franchisees because it's either hit or miss. Either you got a great franchisee leader that just supports you, and whether it's marketing, whether it's backing up, there's tons of support, or you have a lot of guys that'll start a franchise and really not know how to run it or actually have a proper procedures or structures in place. And the franchisee, the person that buys into this franchise, is stuck swimming in the middle of the ocean with no life jacket there for they're drowning. How was the support of this company or how this franchisee, were they supportive? Was it a good experience?
I would say overall they were supportive. Where I needed the most help, they pulled through, which was actually how the hell to build a restaurant and the kitchen operation and the bar operation and all of that. To be honest, and I hope they've improved in this area. I think they probably have at this point. We were very early. The marketing support and all of that just wasn't there. But in hindsight, that really forced me to kind of step up my game in terms of learning social media marketing and building my own personal brand to leverage that to grow the business. So that was the main area. But I've seen it across industries. Oftentimes, the franchisor doesn't really know what they should be providing the franchisee in terms of support. And they did a pretty good job of it. I mean, I was able to build, staff, and run restaurants while still working 8, 9, 10 hours a day in corporate America and investing in real estate. So they definitely gave some support where it was needed.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a positive thing with a franchise is there's individuals that want to be entrepreneurs, but they still have a corporate gig or something like that. That allows you to still do the best of both worlds because you have the support to build it. So I love that. I just throw this out there too. With your experience in that industry, I mean, as a franchisee, like in the franchise industry, like opening up restaurants, what lessons or objectives that you went through, or something that you could say, something that's looking into opening a franchise, what things would you recommend to look for, or little things to really, really focus on before you sign that agreement, kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So sort of two parts to that. The lessons I learned in general were more so just around business ownership and operations in general, and hiring. And essentially, it all boils down to the importance of building a strong culture from hire number one. That was so key. And I could see it across, because I had multiple locations that were sort of microcosms in and of themselves, that had a GM and a staff that was specific to that location. And then 4 hours away, I had another location that was far enough away where it was an entirely separate market, entirely separate operation, and drastically different cultures at each location. And fell on me to establish that from the very first hire, the manager overseeing that location, and then instilling in them what I expect in terms of culture for all the subsequent hires they make, and so on and so forth. So the value of culture in an organization cannot be overstated. It is everything. You can show me 1,000 resumes with kick-ass technical skills, and if they're not cultural fits, it's a hard pass. It has to be, or else it will destroy your mission and your organization. Because if they don't align with you culturally in terms of your core values, and anyone starting a business, that's a lesson in of itself. Set core values before you even try to do anything. You need to know your values and what you represent, what you stand for, and what you're trying to accomplish in terms of creating value for others. Then you have to stick to that. So that was the biggest lesson for me in general. As far as franchising goes, I would say look for franchisors that have had success as operators themselves. You'd be surprised how many franchises, because I actually got involved with another one that I ended up backing out of, thank goodness, again, with COVID and everything happening, where it was a very corporate franchisor structure, and most of the people in management and leadership had never worked at the store level for this particular concept. So they had no experience being operators. It's pretty hard to build out a support system if you've never experienced that which you should be supporting, right? So look for that in a franchisor, and really do your due diligence and make sure they've been through their paces, and they'll be able to empathize with your struggles as an operator.
Yeah, I love that. And did you have any experience in the restaurant industry before you jumped into that?
I had been a busboy and server and stuff like that. So, and I worked at a couple small cafes doing prep cook stuff. I worked a million jobs through high school and college, but that was it. I was never in a leadership role, or never had to build a restaurant or anything like that. So it was certainly a screw it, let's do it moment.
Yeah. Of all industries, I always say, that's one industry I would never even, like I've been an entrepreneur for 26 and a half years. I've had multiple companies. I would never, ever even play around with the restaurant. It's if you, let's bump into COVID. You sold right prior, which is a blessing in disguise at that moment, because I don't know how it was in the US, but in Canada, our restrictions are pretty shit. I think the number is a little over 12,500 restaurants all closed their doors in this process, in this period. So you're looking at a lot of families that have lost their business, that lost their livelihood because of the closures. And I'm assuming, I don't know how the restrictions were in North and South Carolina, but you would have been drastically affected too, I'm assuming, right?
Oh, absolutely. So one of the locations that I sold has since shut down completely. It failed because of COVID. And The others, I think they just got by the skin of their teeth, and it was rough, because I kept in contact. Part of the agreement was that I would help and provide advice and leadership guidance with the new owners. And they struggled, man. They struggled big time. I mean, I really did dodge a bullet, and thank goodness it was.
Did you? I mean, this is, you don't have to get in detail, but when you did sell, did you have any form of payment package or a payment process, or was it all like, here, we sold, it's yours, move on kind of thing? Yeah. So you lucked out too with that, because I mean, a lot of when you're trying to sell a business like that, a lot of times it's broken down into a process of a year, 2-year payments, and you coming on board as a staff and all that. So you big time dodged a bullet there. So growing up, did you always have an inkling or a passion for entrepreneur? Like, what drove you to be in this industry? In a way, what drove you to be an entrepreneur?
Are you ready to unlock your full potential? I want to introduce you to the Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast, a powerful resource to transform your life today. With expert interviews, practical tips, and inspiring stories, this podcast is your roadmap to lasting wellness. Here's what a listener has to say.
I used to struggle with my health, but this podcast changed everything. It's like having a personal trainer, nutritionist, and life coach totally for free.
With over 2,000 5-star reviews, we're a podcast you can trust. The Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast, available now wherever you get your podcasts.
So I don't think I had a drive to be an entrepreneur, if I'm being quite honest, per se. Yeah. But I think a lot of that stemmed from the fact that I didn't even know what the hell an entrepreneur was when I was growing up. I didn't even have an example of what that looked like. I had a drive for more, to achieve more, to be better, to get out of my situation. And so I grew up, both of my parents were 16 when I was born. They were both drug addicts. We were homeless, they were in and out of prison, both of them. They were abusive. All the crap that can happen to a kid. It was pretty rough. And so for me, man, it was just like, how the hell do I get out of this? I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I want to be, but I don't want to be that. And I sort of settled on education, because that was, again, I didn't have any examples to follow, but I'm like, well, I know that if people go to school and do good in school, they're successful, right? Yeah. And so that's what I did. And got good grades in school, did that whole thing, graduated high school valedictorian, got scholarships to college, then went to grad school and all this stuff. And I was pursuing a PhD in biochemistry, and I wanted to be a college professor. So I had this moment where I sort of had to reflect on just how unhappy I was pursuing that path. And it came in year 2 of a PhD program, like I said, over at UC Berkeley in California. And I was like, dude, you are miserable. You are absolutely miserable. Why the hell are you doing this? And I had a full fellowship, like it was extremely rare, hard to get fellowship. Everything was paid for my entire PhD. And I hated doing lab work. I hated doing science. I loved talking about it. I loved teaching it. That was what I really enjoyed, was standing in front of 50 people in a lecture hall and teaching them. And all of the people stuff I really loved, but I hated sitting in the lab and pipetting little
the day-to-day operations.
Dude, it was I felt, and then the payoff was you publish a paper that maybe 1 or 2 other people ever read. And so I wanted to have more impact. I wanted to create more value. I wanted to do something bigger than just get a PhD and do obscure research. And so after 2 years of a PhD program, I told my then fiance, now wife at the time, that I was going to drop out of my PhD. And it came out of nowhere. Everybody thought I was insane. My research advisor lost it. He was like, dude, do you know how many people would kill to have what you have? And I'm like, yeah, no, I get it, but it's just not for me. And that's a huge life lesson in and of itself, man. You have to know when to step away, and don't look at it as a failure, but just you learning a little more about what you should be doing. And that's how I had to frame it for myself. And we were in Northern California and couldn't afford to live once I dropped out. And so we had to move back across the states. And it was the most humbling moment of my life, because here I am with this. So they were kind enough to give me a master's degree for my time, which was nice, because I did 2 years. I say it like I did 2 years, like it was a sentence. But I'm overeducated, unemployed, no money, I'm thinking to myself, I'm just a complete loser. And then to add insult to injury, my wife, she was my fiance then. We moved back to where she could get a job because she could transfer with her company that she was already working with at this point. And so that was Charlotte, North Carolina, where her parents lived. So now I'm living upstairs at her parents' house as an unemployed fiance to their daughter, who is the one making money. Man, it was just like, whew, I was like really evaluating myself as a man at that point, and like, dude, what the hell are you going to do? And I did a self audit. I said, well, what skills do you have? Obviously, you have all this scientific background. Is there anything you can do that's not actually science, and not being a teacher, because that doesn't pay shit?
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And so I'm like just searching for stuff on the internet and looking at job ads and everything. And I'm scrolling on Craigslist of all places. I don't know if people remember that website, but it was like someone had written it for me. The ad said, have a background in science, but don't want to do science. Want to get experience in business. And I'm like looking around like, is somebody how is this possible? And so I click on it, and it's a job in technical recruiting, working in life science industry. So that was my corporate start. And so I started recruiting chemists and positions like that for pharma companies and stuff like that.
Are you still involved in that?
So I left. So I did that for a while. I transitioned to engineering roles within the same company, built that team, and then transitioned to IT. Did that for a while until I finally left after about 8 years with that firm. And that, again, towards the end there, I had built the restaurant business up and everything, sold that. COVID hit, they downsized. It was my opportunity to just say, see you later as well. And so that was how all of that transpired. That was right at the beginning of 2020, when COVID kind of really got serious for everybody around March. And so now I do my podcast. Obviously, my wife and I are still very into real estate investing, and I just joined on with the Smash Co. So John Paramore, he'd be great on your show as well. Yeah. Smash stands for sales, marketing, automation, systems, and hiring. Yeah. Sort of a consulting firm for small business owners and entrepreneurs. Anyway, I came on to help with recruiting, to sort of lend my expertise and revamp the recruiting program there and help him out with that. So I've been doing that lately, and that's been very enjoyable. But, and then we do Just Work Clothing, which was sort of a spinoff of the podcast. People started asking for me to put stuff on shirts, and so I did that. But yeah, I'm doing all sorts of stuff now, man. It's been fun. I have had time to do more of the things I love and enjoy, and obviously focus on being a father and a husband too.
I love it. Let's. There's a few things I want to dive into. Your parents, are they still around? Do you have a relationship with them still?
No. So I don't have a relationship with them. My dad has passed, and my mom, I don't even know where she is. Yeah. So I don't have a relationship with them.
Do you ever have any feelings to reach out and try to get a hold of her, or that's past right now? You kind of put that behind you at this point in your life? Well,
I've tried several times, and it's always the end result is always the same: asking for money. So it's just one of those things, man. Yeah. Where again, and with my dad, this story was crazy, and it's a learning lesson, I think, for people listening, not to hold grudges. So I ignored his calls for 10 years. He was trying to have a relationship with me, and he wanted to build something between us later in life. And after 10 years of ignoring his calls, I got a phone call that he was on life support, and I had to fly down and make the call to pull the plug, because he had he was epileptic. He had a seizure. He fell in the water. And when they found him, he was basically dead. They were able to get him on life support. His brain was gone due to oxygen deprivation or whatever. So anyway, I'm standing here for 3 days regretting ignoring his calls for the past 10 years. And I never got to talk to him again. And I had to be the one to say, let's go ahead and pull the plug. So that was a huge lesson for me in holding grudges against people. And for any of your listeners, man, it's just not worth it, because I would give anything to have one conversation with the man and just tell him how I felt and hear his thoughts.
I mean, that's powerful. I mean, that's something I've done a couple speaking gigs, and one of the topics I talk about is living with no regrets. And it's something I'm very passionate about. I lost my dad. Today's actually 16 months since I lost my dad. But I had the pure opposite than you growing up. Like, I had a very, very tight-knit relationship with my dad. I was a 45-year-old, Dave, that I would talk to my dad 3 times a day still. Like, I would call my dad every night before he went to bed, and we'd have a conversation before he went to bed. And I called him on May 6th, 10 at night. We had a nice deep conversation. I got a call May 7th at 6 a.m. that he literally got up, 5:45, went to the bathroom, walked back into their bedroom, fell in front of my mom, died instantly, a heart attack. Never smoked, never drank, power walked every day. Instant, unexpected. No one knew it was coming. So even though I saw my dad, he spent so much time with his grandkids. I had so many great memories with him. You still have regrets. Yeah. So it's I always tell people, man, pick up the phone, like, make that call, because life changes in seconds. It takes one phone call and everything changes in your life. And that moment of just like, fuck, like, why did I do that? It'll haunt you the rest of your life. And it's so invaluable what you said. I mean, it's just people that are listening to this and have the opportunity to pick up that phone call and call a brother, call a sister, call a family member, call a friend. I mean, even if you don't have a relation with them after, just have that open conversation, just to get it off your chest, and so you have no regrets on your side. I think it's so valuable and so important for people to do. How long have you been married now for?
So my wife and I have been together 16 years, but we've been married for closing in on 10.
10. This month, I'm going on to 19.
Married?
Yeah.
Dude, that's awesome.
Married 19, been together. We're together for about 7 years prior. On and off. No, I would say on and off, but we had I was building my career. She was building her career. So we were together, but we had that, we weren't 24/7 up each other's rear. Like, okay, you build yours, I build mine.
Right.
Let's keep our relationship going strong. And then when it's time to get married, and we've kept that relationship going. I mean, I've been married for 19 years, Dave. And I tell everybody all the same time, we still don't even have one bank account together. She has her bank account. I have my bank account. We never argue about money. We have a very, a relationship where we're very supportive of each other, but at the same time too, we allow each other to build our own careers, our own freedom, and stuff like that. So, and it works for us, and it's been an incredible relationship, and love her to death. And we got 2 amazing kids. My daughter's 16, my son just turned 14. So life is good in the family realm of things. How old's your daughter?
5.
Oh, she's a little one still.
Yeah, she's a little one. Yeah, we just started kindergarten.
How was that?
It's been good, man. It's been good. It was tougher on me on the first day than I think it was on her or her mom. Yeah, I'm the big guy with the beard and tattoos, holding back tears, and like I kept looking back, like, you sure she's okay? Let's just go check, make sure she's okay. And her teacher's like waving me on, like, will you just go get out of here, dude? And meanwhile, my daughter Carter, she's just off playing with the other kids. She's totally fine. Yeah. So that was reassuring to see how she just sort of took to it, and she was good. And it's insane, this feeling of, and I think every parent goes through this, where you just look at them and you're like, I cannot believe that I made that, and now it's an autonomous human functioning with its own opinions, and it's doing like, it's so wild to see, man. And then to see her interact with friends and other kids and everything, it's like, it's so fulfilling. Being a father is unlike anything I've ever experienced.
Yeah, it's the best. And time, I mean, there's so many stats. I mean, there's stats out there that say I'd say 80 to 90% of the FaceTime you have with your kids is before the age of 18. And then you go off to college and stuff. When you start thinking of those numbers, and they're true, like my daughter's 16, and I could literally remember her. I mean, the first 3 months of her life, she was the most colicky baby in the world. I mean, she was up all night crying, and we're like going crazy. Like, what do we do? What do we do? And now she's 16. She's so independent, pure entrepreneur, honor roll, like high performance dancer, just a great kid. We get home, the 16-year-old, we get home and she has dinner ready every night. Like she cooks, she cleans. Wow. Like this kid's on the ball. And I'm looking at her and she's having conversations with me, like already planning college and where she wants to. We're from Toronto, Canada. She's like, I got a condo up in British Columbia. She's like, I think I'm going to start looking at universities there and move there, and I can stay at the place that. And I'm like, no, like slow down, because it flies by. It completely flies by. And what's crazy is what you're having with your daughter. My son just started high school and yesterday was his first day, and I'm like dropping him off at school. I'm like, oh my God. Like I was more worried about him interacting, getting involved in he's a little guy. Like I'm like, and he comes home and he's like, oh, I had a great day, Dad. I'm like, fuck, you always have that protection on that layer, which is, it's precious, right? It's precious. Let's talk about that. You're saying you're holding back tears. I mean, that drives into a topic you talk about all the time, masculinity. Let's talk about it a little bit, and let's talk about how people view it and how people seem to not truly understand it.
Yeah. So like you said, it's something that is near and dear to my heart that I talk about often on my show. And I do because I hear from so many young men who feel essentially what we all feel, that there is this sort of attack on masculinity writ large, and it's labeled wholesale as being toxic and all the negative things people say about masculinity in general. And I think a lot of that stems from a misconception of what actual masculinity is and what being a quote real man is. And so I'm a big proponent of talking about being whole as a man, and that includes being vulnerable with your significant other, being able to talk about how you feel and your emotions, and being a good, caring, nurturing father, being developed not only physically but mentally, spiritually, emotionally. That's what being a man is, and that's, to me, that is the epitome of masculinity and what shapes you into being an effective protector and provider, and all of these terms that we hear about men in the traditional role of a man in a household. That's masculinity. It's not the guy walking around with his chest puffed out starting fights. That's actually a very insecure person, and that's not a masculine person. That's someone who has a lot of insecurity and has a lot to prove, and so they try to project outward what they think is masculinity, and it's simply not. So that's in a nutshell what I think it is. Now, why is there this attack on it? I've talked to a ton of guys who believe this as well, that essentially there is this attack on it. And it really permeates sort of every aspect of our culture at this point, even in schools where there's a participation trophy sort of mentality. And I've talked about this a couple times on my show here recently because it just happened, but my daughter, actually, her mom said something about Daddy's so smart. We try to say positive, reaffirming things to each other in front of her to show her what a loving relationship is. And she said immediately to that, Mommy, you shouldn't say that, because if you say someone's smart, it makes other people feel bad if they're not as smart. And I was like, if I could have the sound effect of like the record scratch, like in real life, it was that moment where it was like, hold on a second, we're going to talk about this. Yeah. And I don't know where she heard that. I certainly didn't tell her that. And she's only exposed to information a couple of other ways. So my best guess is that she heard it somewhere at school, or through a video, maybe on YouTube Kids. She watches these, the kids videos, and you got to be careful with that even, right? The stuff they're showing them. But, I told her, no, it's good to win. It's okay to be a winner. It's good to be the best, and it's okay to praise that. Yeah. And in life, there are going to be people who are the best at things. And if you find that you excel in an area, you should try to be the best at that. And it's okay. Right. And this just is an example of how there's this overarching mentality of suppressing winning in our culture. And that is a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. And so why do you attack masculinity? Why do you attack winning? Why do you attack meritocracy? Why do you attack capitalism? It's all the same thing, man, because the net result of that is creating a populace that's weaker, dumber, slower. And why is that important? It's easier to control. At the end of the day, that is the key to that. So you attack the men first, the most alpha, I hate using that term actually, but the A-type men who are, guys like you and myself who espouse this mentality of trying to be the best and crushing it in every area of life and providing for your family, et cetera. That's who you go after first. And if you can cut the legs out from under that, then your job's a lot easier. And we talk about the nebulous they, them are trying to do this, right? Like the World Economic Forum and whoever. Ultimately, it's just those who have a stranglehold on power in certain elite institutions. They don't want to lose that power, and their end goal is to be able to control people. And so that is why, in a nutshell, I think there's an attack on masculinity. And of course, like I said, capitalism, meritocracy, all these things, and a big push for more socialistic policies and socialism in general, especially in a lot of this. I'm speaking from my perspective as someone down in the States too.
I don't think it changes much across border for us here in Canada. And I love that there's so many,
just a little further down the road.
there's so, man. Oh man, let's we could talk about that all day. There's so many little nuggets there that I want to dive into. I mean, I am a firm believer in teaching your kids to be winners. I've done that from day one.
Yes.
I'm a strong believer in affirmation of just positive, like you said, positive words. Like I have, it's funny because people make fun of me. I've had over my son's bedroom, my daughter's bedroom, since they're little kids, signs that I believe in myself. And I got these done out of wood, and they're carvings, and they're outside their bedroom doors. And I used to make them say it to themselves every single night. And till this day, they still do it.
I love it, man.
And I've always had that mindset where you have to be a winner. You have to have that. You're not going to always win. Every loss is a lesson you'll learn from it. You go back, and you have to have that mindset. You got to teach your kids to be winners. And there's actually a video out right now that I was actually showing my staff the other day, and I love it. I was laughing my head off as a baseball coach, and a parent it's going viral right now. And there's a parent in the stands filming this, and she filmed it in the way, or she or he filmed it in the way where they thought it was a negative thing. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And it was a coach with these little little leaguers, and he's like, "Listen, guys, we're here to win." And he put it in different terms, but he goes, "We're here to win." And he goes, "That's all we're here to do is to win. And remember, guys, second place, no one's going to remember second place." And he goes, "For all you here on this bench that your dads told you it's okay to lose, it's all about learning." He goes, "Your dad's saying it because your dad's a bunch of losers." And he says this. And I was on the floor laughing. There's I'll send you a clip of it. It's absolutely amazing. And having that mindset, because it's all about, I talk about this all the time on the podcast, participation ribbons. I can't stand them. You got to teach your kids from a young age to be winners, because when they get in the real world, no one remembers second place. No one gives a shit. If you're not there to win or to do everything you possibly can to take advantage of any opportunity you get in front of you, you're always going to be pushed behind. And the ones that get pushed behind and are okay with that are always never, ever going to succeed in anything they ever do. So I'm a strong believer in exactly what you said. You have to teach your kids from day one to be winners and want to win and fight to win and push to win in everything they do in life. But I think there's such a strong aspect that we got it from a very young age teacher as parents. And the masculinity aspect, it's okay to, when you talk even with your partner, with your spouse, your girlfriend, your wife, is just having that open conversation. I think it's so important to have open dialogue, open conversation. And one thing I do all the time, and I talk about all the time, is every single night, Monday to Friday, me and my wife, when the kids go to bed, we go for a power walk, and that's our time to talk and have an open dialogue of how your day was and is everything okay? Because a lot of times, especially in marriages, you don't realize what's happening in the other person's mind, what's happening in the other person's head. If you don't have the open dialogue and are vulnerable to understand, like, hey, this is not happening right, or this is not going on, being able to listen and correct it. That's why the divorce rate is so bloody high in North America. It's crazy. I know how it is in the US, but in Canada, I think it's 3 out of every 5 marriages end up in divorce, which is absolutely crazy, right?
I believe it's similar here. Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't. I had to push another meeting. Just making sure. Yeah. Carve out enough time here. That is very important, and my wife and I have recently made more efforts at that, and we are making it a point now. Like we set aside, we own the calendar. Like we have spousal meetings, essentially. One of them is a budget meeting. That's just something that we do, that we have to do. But the others are just for us time. And we're scheduling date nights where we get childcare, and it's just us, man. And that is so important. I can't stress that enough to people. Like, you can't stop dating one another, spending time with each other. It's really easy to focus all your efforts on the kids and the job and the businesses and everything else. And then don't forget why you got into this whole thing to begin with. And by this whole thing, I mean this marriage, this family, this, being dad or husband or whatever. It's because of that woman right across from you. And I will admittedly confess that I, for a long time, was just so focused on so many other things in the vein of being a good contributor, right? A good provider and all of that. But I was neglecting time with my wife. And so now we're making a lot of efforts at that. And it's been so great. We have literally set our alarms earlier to wake up before our kids so we could spend time together.
Yeah, cool.
Like specific time together. Yeah, man. And anybody listening, if you're not doing that, I highly encourage you to do so. Just schedule time with each other, because otherwise, dude, it's really hard for it to just happen organically, So I agree with you completely.
A quick question, Dave. When you're looking at male masculinity, and you're looking at, I'm not going to name brands, but you're looking at certain brands that are very aggressive to male dominance and male strength and just this powerful male. But then you're looking at the vulnerability side, and they don't want to talk about that. Where's that push? Where's that separation, or that fine line between being able to be vulnerable, be understanding, being compassionate, but at the same time too, being a provider, being taking charge, being the caregiver, being the father figure, being the disciplinary when it needs to be, which I think is very powerful as well. Where's that fine line? Because I think there's like, because, and why am I saying this? Because I was talking, not even on a podcast, with ex-UFC athlete that I've actually coached and I became really good friends with in the last few months. And he talks a lot, and I'll introduce you to after the podcast. He'd be a great guest for your podcast, and you could be on his. Awesome. But he talks a lot about exactly this topic, male masculinity, but he's also very against these aggressive brands of apparel and stuff that really put a light on men being just aggressive and strong, and that's all we are. We got to take control. Where's that fine line? Because obviously you're like that. You're obviously a big, muscular, husky guy. You got the beard. You're a dad. You're a provider. But at the same time, too, you're very open with talking about being vulnerable, right? So what's that fine line?
Yeah, that's the toughest part for most men, is how to navigate that, to navigate turning that on and off, and when they should be one way or the other. The aggression part, the testosterone fueled aggression and all of that is the easy part for us, for most guys. Yeah, that's the easy part. And I think what happens with a lot of those brands, and I'm not the biggest fan of a lot of those brands either. I am more, my mentality, and I just had Adam Smith, a Green Beret, a former Green Beret, who's now a coach and does some really awesome stuff. I just had him on my show. It was an awesome episode. And we were talking about this concept of the warrior poet. And that's what I love, is someone who is a warrior and a poet, right? So for me, it's, I'm vulnerable. I am understanding. I'm logical. I'm calm when I'm with my family, pretty much always, so that's my default. Okay. Unless there's an event that triggers like the need for me to be a disciplinarian, which I'm still calm, even when I'm a disciplinarian, and I'm still measured, and I'm very much less of I'm mad and more of, this is what happened, and let's talk through why you shouldn't do it that way. But if it's a situation where I feel my family is threatened, or I can turn it on, or if I'm in the gym, I turn it on. And it's it's like any other skill, man. You just have to work towards it. And I was a reckless teenager, 20-something-year-old knucklehead up until my early 30s probably, and really didn't understand. That's why I said my wife and I have recently made efforts at this, because I really didn't understand just how important it was for me to play that role, and be open emotionally and to be vulnerable. And look, dude, I'll be completely transparent. It also took me going to therapy to talk about it. And I was the type of guy that kept things bottled up and didn't want to talk about my feelings and didn't. I look at it from the perspective of, I don't want to burden other people with my shit. And my wife basically had to shake some sense into me and say, your shit is my shit.
Yeah.
Share your shit with me. It's our shit, you know? And it's so liberating when you finally do. Now, because I can tell her anything and everything. But no, I don't know if there's an exact answer to that question. I think it's more about you just being
find the balance.
Yeah, finding a balance between them, but knowing that, and the way Adam says it is just knowing when to go into savage mode. And I think the big difference though is that a lot of these brands and a lot of these personalities who try to portray men in a certain light, they portray it as though savage mode is the default, and that's not the default. You know, the default is to be what we are right now, to be inquisitive, to be measured, to be logical, to be curious. I think that, and I think a lot of this is why, for example, we're both podcasters. So this is why people are so attracted to Joe Rogan, because he embodies both sides of that coin. He's a hunter. He's a martial artist. He lifts weights. He does all these very masculine things, but then he also has long form intellectual conversations with people from both sides of the political spectrum and scientists and authors. And so he really does sort of personify that warrior poet type of mentality. You know,
that's a perfect example.
Yeah. And look what the net result is, right?
Yeah.
People are massively attracted to his platform because of it.
Yeah. I love that. Let's dive into one more thing here. Fitness. I mean, obviously it's a big part of who you are. Yeah. When did you actually start getting into fitness? And that's a big part of my life. I've owned gyms. When I was 18, 19, I don't look it now, but I stepped on stage. Like I was really into it, and I mean, fitness is still, I still work out. Actually, my workout partners now are my kids. My 14, 16-year-olds. Awesome. I get home at 3:30. We pack our stuff and hit the gym every single day, all three of us. When did it become part of your life, and how much is it part of your life?
It became a part of my life when I was 15, and I'm 35. So it's been a part of my life for 20 years, a large part of my life. It's still a large part of my life. And of course, the reasons why have evolved over time, and the types of fitness endeavors I pursue have evolved and changed. But it started because I was, a young kid in school, and finally got access to the weight room at school. And it was the first time in my life that, remember the background I came from, drug addict, abusive parents, all this terrible shit. It was the first time in my life that I could have full control over a process, and the result was directly correlated to my efforts and my efforts alone. Yeah. My mom couldn't take it from me and go sell it for drugs. It was mine. I put in the work. My body changed. And so I was immediately obsessed with it, to be quite honest, at that stage in my life. Because also, as a kid with low confidence that came from a white trash family, whatever you want to call it, and I was picked on at school and all that stuff, some for that, putting on muscle and getting confidence and all of that stuff was huge for me. So finding the weight room really did change my life, because it showed me that I was capable. It showed me that hard work is how you get results. And it boosted my confidence. And so as I lifted weights and became more athletic and stronger and all of these things, and gained more confidence, I did better in school, and all of these corollaries. And since then, it's always been a part of my life. Now it's more of my meditation, to be quite honest. It's my release away from everything. It's the thing I can always count on to be there waiting for me, no matter what else I've got on my mind and what other load I'm carrying. I can leave it all right there on the weight room floor and endure some pain and suffering for a little bit. And I do think that discomfort is a very important aspect to our lives. And if it has to be forced discomfort, that's fine. Yeah. But getting uncomfortable, sweating, struggling, experiencing that is so important for building character. I think especially in young people. And
building growth. There's growth in you, right? Any form of stress, whether it's physical or mental, is just going to increase your growth as a human, right? Which I think is so valid. I mean, my kids from God, I would say 4 or 5 years old, have been into fitness. Like my kids don't play video games. I would get home and my kids would be arguing over who could get on the treadmill. And it's been like that from day one. And I started that from such a young age that it's part of who they are now. It's part of their DNA. They want to work out. They want to eat healthy. Like it's a family thing. We go for family bike rides. We do stuff like that. So it's just become part of who we are. And I think as a parent is something you've got to start from a very young age and just build these lifelong habits from a young age that become part of their DNA. It's so valid. When you go to the mall and I sit there and my kids and I'm looking around, I'm like, how many kids are 16, 17 and they're overweight and they're out of shape? It's incredible. It's awful. And I look at my kids and they're at such a young age and they were loving it. Right. And it's something that because I started from such a young age, right?
Yes. And that notwithstanding, it's so pernicious, man. It's this push towards you can be healthy at any size and you're morbidly obese, but you're still beautiful and this all in the name of body positivity. It's like, look, man, I will never belittle you for how you look. I will never treat you any different for how you look, but do not tell my child that it's healthy to be fat.
No.
And do not put it out there in the milieu that you can be healthy at any size. This is simply not true. Scientifically, it's not true. No. And the most mind-blowing part was when we knew that obesity was one of the most consequential comorbidities during COVID.
Yeah.
And we still had body positivity being pushed even harder. It's like you're essentially telling people to do something that is going to reduce
kill them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Kill them or reduce their lifespan. Yeah. But yes, kill them. And man, that infuriates me to no end. And again, it's like I'll be the first one to cheer you on if you're overweight and you make it to the gym and you're ready to make some changes. And like, again, like I would never. And it gets conflated, right? When people start talking about how they shouldn't make ads about being fat is okay or healthy, they immediately think that, oh, you don't like fat people. It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. No. Just like I know that smoking is unhealthy and I don't hate smokers. And just like I know that not brushing your teeth is unhealthy, but I don't hate you if you don't brush your teeth. It's just, this is a fact and it's an observation. And the good news is it's something that you can change and you have control over.
Yeah.
Right. And you hit on something with your kids, a word that was so important, and that's habits.
Yeah.
It's become habit for them. Right. And that's just something I would tell anybody who's facing the daunting task of going to the gym for the first time or finally starting a routine. And it seems like this insurmountable thing. It gets easier every time, and it will eventually, it takes discipline, but eventually it will become habitual. And what I always tell people when I'm talking to them about this is like, look, man, when you get up in the morning, you brush your teeth. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, why? They're like, it's a habit. And I'm like, exactly. You don't need motivation to brush your teeth. You don't need me to call you up and scream in your ear and rah you to brush your teeth. It's a habit. You've formed that habit. You can do that with working out. You can do that with anything, man. Yeah. And so now you're just like, I work out. It's what I do. It's part of my day. And I just want to mention that because anybody listening who's feeling like it's hopeless and they've got too much weight to lose or whatever it may be, I promise you that's not the case. And I promise you you can turn it into a habit. You can absolutely transform your life and who you are.
Yeah. It's a domino effect, right? I mean, you have to look at it as one little day at a time, right? I mean, it is very, very haunting, very daunting for somebody that has a big goal ahead of them. And this can be very scary, but it's just, you have to have that mindset where you got to break it almost into those micro goals where it's like, okay, today we're going to drink 2 extra glasses of water. Tomorrow we're going to walk an extra 30 steps.
Yep.
That's that process. And then as the results start happening and you start getting that affirmation by your friends, your family of the results, and you start looking on a scale, you start looking at the mirror, you start feeling your clothes looser on you, everything just starts building and building, and that builds more energy, that builds more positivity, that builds more vision of the end result, right? And it's just one step at a time, man. You just gotta start. You just gotta fucking start. That's all it is.
That is the hardest part for most people.
Yeah.
And I'm really big on the topic of fear, and how your fears are always disconnected from reality. So what I mean by that is there's something that you've been putting off doing. You're afraid to do it, and what you have in your mind of how it's going to go is almost always worse than it actually goes. If you just go freaking do it, at the end of it, you're going to be like, oh, that was a lot easier than I thought. And that's almost inevitably going to being the case. I don't care if it's starting a restaurant business or a clothing company or going to the gym or being a parent. Being a parent's a daily challenge. But for the most part, I mean, that is how it's going to be. And I think that it's because we're biologically programmed to sort of expect the worst as an adaptive advantage, right? Because you're always prepared for the worst, which, look, in a business context, sure, plan for the worst and or at least have contingencies in place. But man, we get paralyzed by fear, and that's something that drives me crazy. Maybe I'm just a reckless knucklehead though, and I just go for it every time.
I think that's being a natural entrepreneur too, right? I mean, everybody finds that moment or that as an entrepreneur, whether it's something that clicks and triggers you to start focusing on yourself or focusing on your own goals and your own path. But I mean, I think there's that $1 million question: are you born an entrepreneur, or could it be taught? And I'm a strong believer that you can be taught the skills, the tools, but that hustle, that drive, it's in you. Either you got it or you don't.
It's so sure.
It's in you. I mean, I started my first company at 17. It's in you. You have to want it, right? This has been an incredible conversation. Where could our audience get a hold of you? Where could they follow you? Your podcast? Give me some information on you.
Yeah, so I'm everywhere. I'm on all the social media platforms, on Instagram at I am Dave Hurt, Twitter at I am Dave Hurt, same thing on TikTok. The podcast is Free Mind with Dave Hurt. It's on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all over the place. If you're interested in our clothing, justworkco.com. You can get any of the t-shirts that we produce there. And I think that's everywhere.
I love it, brother. I love it. I mean, I'm sure we're going to continue this conversation, and it's been long overdue, and I look forward to continuing it, brother.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me. I definitely want to get you on my show here soon. And man, the time flies by when you're having a good conversation, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's already 1:30 here. This has been awesome, brother. Thank you.
All right, Jeff. Thank you, sir.